Alright. So, what is it that falls away with awakening, or realization, or anatta? And what is it that stays? What's left? And, what's that like? What's it like to live in an internal world that is perpetually relating to an experience that it feels like it owns, that feels personal? And then when the whole illusion that that's based on falls away, what's that like? What is the difference? Because a lot of people have asked me about my experience, and I always say all I'm ever doing, all we can do is describe in language our own experience. But they've asked me, like, what is anatta? What is no self realization like? What is it like living life without a self in it? And honestly, there's it's not something that I can answer, because I'd have to take a subjective position on it and convey information, and then whoever's asking would have to relate to that information from a subjective position. So I can't describe it, but I can point to it in your experience, and what it looks like, what it feels like, is anything that's in your experience right now. Because it's nothing real that falls away. It's not a change that has implications for the individual. It's what you're experiencing now. Your experience, whoever's watching this, is already inherently liberated. It already doesn't have a self in it. So that's it. What you're experiencing now is the end point, liberation. And I say that to point out that what happens in mind when I make a statement like that, what starts up and, starts relating to that information. It might be like a resistance. It might be like, no, my experience now isn't liberated. I don't feel like that's true. I'm having this experience, and it doesn't feel like what I hear the non-dual speakers talk about. So that's the function that falls away. It just doesn't start up anymore with reality. So it's like I could make a statement and say that your experience now is liberated, is free. You're free of division, free of self, and it's just like, that's it. It just stops there, and the experience rolls on. But it's that thing that starts up, that relates to the information, that begins resisting the information and trying to figure it out. What does this mean for me? It's this assumption, these thoughts, this bunch of sensations that are driven by or based on this assumption that what I am right now, my experience right now, isn't enough, and I'm looking for a better experience. I need to move towards something better than this. I need to realise something in this, which is like finding something in it that's going to make it complete, that's going to change. But it doesn't change, ultimately. It can't change. It can't change, because there's no past and future in this. So I'll give you my experience of what it felt like to live in this internal world, to operate from the assumption in a felt to be real way that I am separate, that I'm a discrete entity here, and I have this, you know, the only way I can experience reality is to relate to it as a subject. And then what it's like now, because I've just said that this can't change, but again, the mind doesn't like this, so that subjective position doesn't like this, but I'm not talking to that subjective position. If I was to create a thought now, or a thought appears now with a memory of what it used to be like, right now it would be very different, relatively speaking. So what is the difference? If that what I just said there confuses anyone, because I just contradicted myself. It doesn't matter. You know, I'm not describing anything real. Relatively speaking, there's a description, there's a story about a character, someone's experience, but you need to hold these things really lightly. You can see I contradicted myself but if you can feel what I'm pointing to in this talk, you see through that contradiction. You'll see that it doesn't matter. The language doesn't matter. This that I am is free to use language in any way, and it doesn't mean anything, or its meaning is limited. But so before I had a mental narrative that was constantly running. Like there was no gap in thought. There was no gap at all. It was just thought. I had periods of time where there was less thought, and there were brief gaps in thought, but they were not noticed. They were not. It was negligible in comparison to this constantly running mental narrative. And it was when I went into my teenage years, it started to feel. I've started to feel this pressure. It started to feel important because I need to figure out who I am in this world, and that assumption that might be how people live, but for me, that assumption, that experience of being this one person in this life, knowing I'm gonna die, knowing I have a limited time and I need to navigate this external world and other people and figure out my place in it. There was that pressure. That whole thing was just daunting. I didn't. It's like part of me didn't want it. I don't want this society. I don't want to fit into this. It's a pressure. It's like something I had to do. It's necessity for survival. I have to figure out who I am. So, and the way I did that was relating to life from this position that felt like me, this person, this limited entity. And I would relate to life by comprehending, seeing, hearing, feeling life as it was appearing now. But I was only relating to that through my mind, through thought. The thought was running constantly, so I was relating to my thought version of what this life is and what it means. So the mind had to constantly run to keep up with this and put meaning into it and figure it out and to keep myself safe or move towards something more favourable and such. It was like life was too much for that mind. It's like it just constantly ran, relating to life, relating. What does it mean to me? Where do I fit into this? How can I do this? How can I get that? Do I want this? Do I not want that? And that's when it started really to become dysfunctional, because as a child before that, it was different. I could relate to things, and there was a curiosity, well, childlike curiosity about it. There was an imagination about it. It was like I only related to the things that I found interesting and I liked. At least that's what I remember. Imagination, play, creativity. Then it started to become serious in my teens, and I was lucky in a way because I had an outlet. I had something which eased the discomfort of existing like that. I had my sport, physical activity thing, and I got really addicted to that because there were breaks in this mental narrative when I was engaging in that. It's like they weren't noticed really. Like the gap in the narrative wasn't noticed. It was like tossed to the side. It wasn't important. And when the mind came back on, it wouldn't be registering. But something in me registered that. Something in me was drawn towards that, and it was like a relief from this constantly running relationship with life based on me. So it became dysfunctional, and it started to take control and get out of control at the same time. And the things that I could relate to things and it would make sense. So it's like, this means that I need to do that, and then it's functional. It makes sense. It kind of lines up with reality. But then there were these narratives that were just not based on like consensus, or what would you call it, like agreed upon reality. They weren't based. There were delusions, like egoic delusions. So I would be in my mind ferociously defending myself against the world. So if someone was like wronged me, it would really affect me, because I would hold that in my mind, that I would try to figure out, like, what is that, what happened, how can I fix this, how can I prevent that from happening. And that is suffering, real suffering. So there were lots of things like that where I was relating to life, and I felt like I felt small. I felt like I was having to constantly exert effort and control things especially in my mind, to validate my position as a person in life, and that was a lot of effort. So that suffering led me to have my kind of second break in the narrative, which was consuming psychoactive substances, so to speak, various. And there was a thinning of this narrative. There was an ease of that, an easing, like a kind of finite remedy to that constantly running personal life in the world. And it came with some relief, but it turned into a dysfunctional behaviour, because the the function there was, the behaviour was, I don't feel right, I don't feel good, I need to do this to feel better. Desire and aversion. And it led to that becoming an extreme thing where like all I was doing was engaging in that behaviour. And it was all based on getting away from the uncomfortableness of the reality, the life I was living. Getting away from my relationship with life based on myself and making it better. So it was all movement, it was all activity, it was all effort, constant effort. You know, the internal world became something that was just nothing like reality, so to speak. Nothing like what was appearing in the senses now. It wasn't here, it was way over there. It was up and in to somewhere else. Like I wasn't paying attention to the senses. I wasn't paying attention to the fact that I was thinking, that there were thoughts. Because the thoughts had so much power, they just didn't stop. Around about that time, or a bit before, I got into Buddhism, or awakening, or whatever. I can't remember right now the materials that were there, and something in me recognised that was it. That was the solution to this dysfunctional relationship with life, this feeding of me that didn't feel right. Like I read about it, I saw it, and I was like, that's it. I know that's it. Something in me deeply just recognised that, and it's like from then, part of me was all into that. It was like, this is what's gonna happen at some level, and there was doubt and resistance that went along the way, but that deep recognition that okay, that's they're talking about, or at the time Buddha was talking about my experience now. It touched my experience as it was now. It wasn't a theoretical thing about something that's not this, but right now it touched my experience. I was like, Buddha's talking about my experience, the 2,500 years ago or something like that. That gap was bridged immediately when I saw these words, and I was like, that's it. But then didn't change anything, and I tried to meditate. I kind of got into meditation and stuff, and it didn't quite change anything. I kind of like adapted my physical activity, my sports and stuff like that, to like a kind of like a philosophical, theoretical version of what I had read, enlightenment, because it seemed that was the only thing that felt close to that in my life. So I kind of brought that into it in a sense. And I was noticing when I was moving, when I was engaging in physical activity, like I noticed that again, the words that I read were describing my own experience. I noticed that gap. I noticed that there was something not happening in this instant. Something wasn't there. Something was different about it, so to speak. So I kind of forgot about that, engaged in some mad stuff, got the suffering, went to an extreme degree, and the substance abuse went to an extreme degree, like the most extreme you can imagine, all because the this didn't feel right. So, you know, I wanted to get away from life. I wanted to get away from me. And then, you know, I got sober. Like I've told everyone the story of, you know, the first awakening, which was through the 12-step program, when I disidentified from the thoughts of the addict, the identity of the addict. You know, I got out of that part. Like I saw that I was bigger than that. I saw that wasn't me, and that took its power away. I kind of got my life together, and then casually I kind of came across the kind of non-dual stuff or awakening stuff or whatever. Casually kind of came across that, and it casually, in a kind of relaxed way, came back into my life. At some point, like before that, there was seeking. Like all my life was seeking. I was seeking for something that wasn't what was in front of me. It wasn't this. It was all based on seeking. But casually got back into the awakening thing. And things were different this time because I had kind of let go of the part of the pathological function that was going on in mind that was based on identity. Things were different. It was a bit clearer. Like, you know, I could you know, I would walk down the street and I'd be in my head, completely in my head, and I would, you know, barely notice the environment, the senses, you know, barely notice it, the landscape, the appearance that's here. All of my attention was in mind. And, you know, at this point in my life, a lot of the narratives and mind activity that was going on was kind of like funny stuff, or, you know, stuff I wanted to do, or stuff like that. It wasn't this defensive, resentful entity that's only that's constantly remembering things that I didn't like, and constantly, you know, trying to get away from the reoccurrence of those things, and try to figure that out. It was like, you know, the mind became a little bit playful again, and imaginative again, and they were there. I noticed the gaps. I would have described this differently if you go to my earlier videos. Maybe not, but something in me recognised what presence is. That what like Eckhart Tolle was talking about, presence. You know, before it was just a concept, but something in me recognised what that is, and I was like, oh, like presence. And it was like, at this point, you know, before I got into the seeking and the looking for a different experience, and, you know, trying to find enlightenment or figure out what they were talking about. But this time I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna be present. I'm just gonna try and be present and enjoy life. Like, and there was the inquiry was going on there, but it wasn't how would you say, like a big effort or like a big focus. The inquiry was just there, and it was just like present. And I felt my body. As I was walking, I felt I saw the environment. I was about to say I felt the environment, but not yet. I saw the environment. Like, I became interested in just looking at things and hearing the sounds, and then there was this inquiry, and it was just a curiosity about, what is this? What am I that's here? Because I wasn't trying to get away from it, or it wasn't looking to get out of this experience, or like grasping towards a better experience, or trying to figure my life out. It was just like a relaxed curiosity. the mind could be quiet at points, and I kind of opened up to the senses. So it was, at this point in my life, my mind was very different from what it was before, and because I had got sober and I had done a good bit of work on myself throughout that. I work on emotions and thought patterns and basically CBT, and I had counselling and stuff like that too. So I'd done a good bit of work on myself, but it was all based on the self. And it worked. It worked to tidy up my life, so to speak, to get me to a point where I was engaged with life, not running from it, in various ways. So then, like, in the first videos you see me describe it, I there was a recognition of something there. There was an opening up to something there, and it came about because I just opened up and I was like, I'm just going to enjoy life. I'm going to be present, and life's here. So, and it was very different from being in the internal world. Very different. Like the experience was different from being pushed into the mind space, wherever that is. It's subtly not here. The senses were different. It was open. It was expansive. It was solid presence, and I noticed that distinction between the two modes of being, so to speak. I noticed how the mind had this ability to pull me into a relationship with thought, pull me into a narrative about something. I noticed that back and forth, and then I would recognise that, and then, okay, I'm in thought, whatever that might be. And when I recognised that, it was like a mini awakening. It just came back to the senses. I don't know who said this, but I thought it was good. Lose your mind and come to your senses. Who was it that said that? It doesn't matter. So there was a back and forth there. There was like a meing and being going on there. Like in that recognition, I knew that what I am is beyond those thoughts. But I hadn't fully seen it because the thoughts were still kind of running. There was still this back and forth. There was still this assumption based on the point of view of the subject, me, that there needs to be something more than this, or there needs to be less thoughts, or that magnetism into the mind has to stop, and that I'm going to cause it to stop. And if you watch my earlier videos, something shifted, which I've been trying to describe ever since, and it's deepened. But something shifted. Something stopped in its reality. There was something that seemed to be inherent here, walking down the street. That's just here, inherently, this position of me, and it is observing the pull back into mind, into the kind of dreamy world of thought, and the opening up to what's here. And it came about, basically, if I was to try and describe it, because I noticed that inherent position was only here, that subjective me, that person, that identity, the limited identity, was only here when those thoughts started up, when the thoughts are there to relate to from that position. And then it wasn't there. But see, when it was there, it suggests that it was always there and closes the gap. So it feels like it's always there. But I noticed that there was, or that something became aware that it wasn't there all the time. But I, in a different way, felt like I noticed I was still here. The sense experience, the appearance that the character's all based on, that appears within, is just here. And I think I described it at the start like, is this it? Like, it was too simple, it was too obvious. The direction changed from looking out to relaxing into what's here, getting closer to just what's here, not some other experience or somewhere else. The direction shifted, that like there was a tipping point where it tipped into now. And deeply I knew that this whole thing, this awakening thing, it's just about what's here. It's just life as it is now, including everything. So something real stopped happening, and then I could see the thoughts still continue to appear due to momentum. But they didn't have this real, at times they were neutral, they didn't have this real subject in them that's relating to them. It's here. I saw that was a thought as well. Or something became aware that that's just a thought. It's only suggested in the context relating to thoughts. It's an assumption. And with that, what is here opened up. What I am that's here opened up. And it was like it was always here. It wasn't something to get. It was never really obscured by the thoughts and the experience of identity. All of that was it. So this deepened pretty quickly, but there were, delusion continued. Behaviour and thinking that was informed by that sense of a subject, the sense of self, continued, and sometimes it felt real. But every time that appeared in experience, every time the thoughts that were informed by that assumption, that were based on that context, the context was gone, but all the thoughts that were based on that context came and went, and when they came and went, they just lost their power. So it's like every time they came up, it was an opportunity for me, reality, non-dual nature, to let go of a bit more of it. So it was a letting go into this. And eventually I started to let go of, or see through, so to speak, other assumptions, deeper assumptions that, I'm here in this body, this is what I am. The world's out there apart from what I am. That exists here inherently, and I'm moving through it, and it's still there when I walk away. The sound is out there, that there are things, that any of this is separate whatsoever. And with that, the felt reality of this context, this identity, lost even more of its realness. So thoughts could come along about, based, talking about identity or something like that, but that didn't matter, because there's no real self in it. There can be like a relative experience of an outside world that's apart from what I am, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't, because it's clearly not real. There's something more real that's primary to all of this, that's essential. And it could the more and more this deepened, it could be felt, I could feel it. It changed something, and the body changed, because there was this contraction, this feeling of being a body, this sensation that was all bundled up with thought, or constructed spatially with thought. The feeling of that opened out into, you know, everything that's here, and everything that's here flooded in to this felt contraction in the centre, and it released. Just letting go, letting go, letting go by seeing clearly, or it becoming clear, you know, what's here, what's here. So there was still this tendency there to frame this experience in a subtle way. So at some point it appeared to me, you know, my experience of the most essential, most primary reality was that this is a dream. I'm all of it type thing. Like, this is all appearing inside a dream. The dream is the substance of all of it. But there was still an assumption there of a dreamer. Something still here that what it does is it frames the sense experience in a way into it's like the most basic level of that context. And really it was based spatially in up here somewhere where I am. You know, it was hiding behind form. It was hiding in this context. It was hiding in the labelling of this as awareness or knowingness, or, you know, as if that was a tangible substance, that was a tangible explanation. Subtly there was something still apart from this, experiencing it, like a kind of subject, or but at this point it was like God's mind. It was like an infinite subject, and with that there was a tendency to frame experience in a way that's real, that there is anything real like this experience, where there is unreal. You know, behind my point of view was infinite nothingness. Behind my point of view, and manifestation appeared within that. So there was a reification of this point of view, of this nothingness that you can't find. There was a reification of something that isn't here. So at some point I noticed that, and this coincided with me talking about this as well. You know, I could use this context to talk about it. I had found the new thing called spirituality. In a way, it was kind of like that. And that's what I was basing my explanation of reality on, in a way. But I noticed that there were this deeper narrative. And someone in the comments, I was describing this, and someone in the comments made a comment that said it's nostalgia, and I I had a realization there, because I was like, is that what nostalgia means? Is that the meaning of the word nostalgia? And I looked it up and all that, and I was like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. That people were referring to this experience with that word. But I couldn't find the comment to comment on it. But yes, it was like this nostalgia, this emotional narrative that was based on there being something here, like an infinite entity, and it was kind of like memories. You know, you get the nostalgic memories from your life, and you've got the form of the memory, the image of what it is and what happened, but then you've got the feeling of nostalgia, and it's kind of like a sensation in a way, like a kind of unfindable sensation or something, kind of. And there was this nostalgia for the nostalgia of God based on that there's actually something here, that there's me being here, you know, there's something other than just the appearance. So I noticed that wasn't there all the time. And what was here in its absence is nothing that could ever be held onto or understood or described with a descriptor like awareness, or framed in a context like God's mind. It's just simply what's here in immediacy, this appearance, this sense experience. It's like there's nothing other than this. This is it. It's like a great relaxation of having to interpret this at all, or there being subtly somewhere else or something else. There actually being a point of view here that sits here and observes whilst all this moves around and morphs and shifts and changes. And it was actually based spatially here. The assumption was like here, behind the head or something like that. So without that, then there's a full merging, a full connection with what's actually here. So the senses became so, I'll omit the existential stuff, but the senses became like, I'm not going to be able to describe this, but you're looking at it right now, you're feeling it right now. They became so much more intense, because I was that, if you could say I did stops making sense, but I feel everything, I felt everything. I feel the sensation of my hands in the trees over there, and I feel the it's like this sense. It was basically based on my senses before, personal, and I own these senses: seeing, hearing, touching, so on. But it's like all the senses just merge into this one non-dual sense, but it's this impossible appearance that's simply here. And it's like there was this fascination with that, coming from itself, even a fascination with the experience of thought. And it was just like the basic framing, when it appeared, which is not all there all the time. The basic framing is like something coming out of this and comprehending it and being like, this is incredible, this is a miracle, how can this be? And then that would fall into experience and it would come back again. It was like appreciation, love, empathy, awe, just constant awe, and the naturalness of this without any sort of framing in it, or there being something real here that's subtly apart from it, or observing it or dreaming it. It's just the dream. So then that's it. It's just life. The amazing thing about awakening is getting close to life, becoming life, and living. So then it's just living. And now there's nothing real in it. Anywhere. It's beyond real and unreal. There's no need to frame it in a way, or comprehend it or understand it, find out, what is my experience, where am I in it? When thoughts appear, when conditions change and thoughts appear, and it's not like, it's like that's appearing on its own due to conditions interacting with themselves. There's no thinker. Maybe I'm not trying to explain this, but All of this is interacting infinitely, without distance, without separation, without form, interacting with itself immediately, right now. It's impossible, but these interactions, everything's connected, so to speak, such that there's nothing to connect. So it all moves as one expression now, in immediacy. And the expression is driven by the conditions, the infinite conditions of the universe. And you can feel that. You can feel the universe. The universe being, right now, just this. You can feel it, and you can feel it driving the movements of your body. And it's like, even if there's a thought that appears that says I'm doing this, that's driven by the infinite conditions. So it's like the body moves itself. The flow states that I entered when I engaged in sport, I had these flow states where it's like the body does itself, it moves itself. It is all of this all the time. So there's no longer a need to seek that different experience, because it's a better one. The body moves itself, the words speak themselves, the sound hears itself, seeing sees itself, and seeing is what's seen. The interpretations just collapse into it infinitely, and it excludes nothing, is the important part. It is inherently liberated. There is inherently no small separate self in this, and there never was. Nothing is excluded whatsoever, but I mean that now. So anything became clear, and it is clear that anything that appears in experience is all there is. There's no other that's perfect. It has to be perfect, because it is what is. It's the only is. The only thing that would label it imperfect is a position on it that looks for a better is, or compares this to before, or looks forward to after. And this might sound confusing, but it's a great relaxation. It's reality relaxing, falling into itself infinitely, without anything doing it other than itself. Giving birth to itself and eating itself. Like that snake you see. So like as I move my head, it's like the appearance gives birth to itself. It appears from nothing. There isn't a nothing, but there's appearance. It's incredible. It's an absolute miracle. And there's an appreciation for that. There's a ongoing love that this is. And it's like there is no internal world anymore. There's no thing here relating to experience. There's just experience. And that experience may appear as a thought experience, so it might be thought. Thought isn't frequent like it was before, it isn't constant like it was before, but there's still thought. Maybe most of the time there's no thought, but thought appears as the conditions interacting with themselves, as a function for this to move itself as it's moving. And it's perfect. So it doesn't look like anything, it looks like what this is now. Awakening doesn't have implications that way, it doesn't look like something. No self isn't an experience. An experience. So it's like out the window with that. I need to think and act and behave in a spiritual way to be enlightened. It's like, no, enlightenment is inherent. Liberation is inherent. You know, relatively for the character, I guess you could say there are implications. You know, there's no longer a constant engagement in this internal world such that you can appreciate what is without being over-focused into a mind space. So it's like you relax into the senses as the senses, and you live as the senses. But it's just one sense. And there's no longer a need to figure anything out or get to a better this. There's no problem in it. It's a problem to solve, or there's no need to resist even the appearance of suffering. Anything that you feel because you are it. So you feel it, you are feeling it. There's no getting out of that. So you go so far into it that there's no you in it. So everything's an expression of the infinite feeling itself, and that is what you are. And that's clear. So you see how myself and other non-dual speakers, people have realised Anatta say that there's an end to something. There is an end to the path. The path goes out the window at some point, and it's just life. Where you were anyway when you started the path. But I guess you could say relatively things are different. Something stopped, but that something that stopped never actually happened. It was never real in the first place. So something unreal, and it's created in the mind, stops. And it's this, I've been using this word a lot recently, relationship between two things, a subject and an object. Me relating to my experience. But when it relates to something that's not here, it's just thought. You can be sure of that. But then it gets more and more immediate. And it relates to the environment, what's happening now. Then it gets more immediate, and there's no space for a relationship anymore. It's instantaneous, constantly. There's no space for a relating to. There's no relationship here. It just is what is. Anyway, I think that's quite a long video, but I'll leave it there for now, and I'll talk to you next time.